Hello, and welcome to today's online conference about HealthyLife, a new digital platform where you can find all the information you need about making sustainable dairy farming more profitable. My name's Julia Hart, and I'm here in the studio in Amsterdam with Jacques Bergman.
Hello, everybody. My name is indeed Jacques Bergman, and I'm the program manager for HealthyLife at Trouw Nutrition, and I'm really looking forward to this event.
And you're my co-host for today as well. We have a really exciting programme for you this afternoon with a 60-minute talk show that we're going to kick off in a moment, and we'll be featuring several well-known experts from the industry. After that, after a short break, these experts will give in-depth presentations on their topics. So do stay tuned and make sure you come back and ask all of your questions about those. Let me introduce our experts for today. We have Anke Rome from the Institute of Livestock Farming in Germany, and she'll be talking about lifetime daily yield. We have Albert de Vries, professor from the Department of Animal Science at the University of Florida, and he'll be talking about the optimal number of lactations for a dairy cow. Next is Lance Boomgaard, a professor in dairy nutrition, about the impact of systemic inflammation on a lactation performance. Then Victoria San Fernandez, ruminant researcher here at Trouw Nutrition. She'll tell us all about optimizing hindgut health. And we conclude with Joep Driesen, a veterinarian and director of Cow Signals, and he talks about the impact of farm management on the number of lactations per cow. Then, as I said, we have a short break, after which all of the experts will give their in-depth presentations. And in that round, you can ask all of your questions on the same screen as you're looking at right now. The questions will be answered by our editorial team, or they may come in here on my iPad, and I may put them directly to our experts today. We also want to hear your thoughts and opinions, so please be sure to fill in the polls that we'll be sharing throughout the first part of this conference. Now, before we have Anke at the table, Jack, I've got a question for you. What are the biggest challenges facing dairy farmers in the world today?
Now, of course, Julia, I can't speak for all farmers in the world, but all the farmers that I spoke to recently, they consistently talk about the increasing pressure from society to be more sustainable, and their concerns, what effect that would have on their farm income and profitability. I think we have to remember that, particularly in Northwest Europe, dairy farming is family farming. So those farms are in the family for 10 generations. And farmers find it very important that their next generation and the generation afterwards will also have a farm to look after.
Okay. And what role can the HealthyLife platform play in this?
One of the biggest challenges that farmers face is managing the transition to lactation. And we are hoping that we can help them make that a little bit easier. So we do our own research. We work with partners. Some of them are speakers today. We talk to experts. We review all the literature. And then this enormous amount of information we then have brought together, will try to translate into practical advice to make it a bit easier for the farmers to deal with transitions.
Oh, super. Sounds like a really valuable resource. Thank you. So now it's time for our first online poll, and it should be popping up on your screen about now. The question is, what is considered to be the optimal lifetime daily yield of the best performing farms in the world? And you'll see 4 possible choices that you can pick from. We'll come back with the results in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to introduce our first guest, and that's Anke Rome. She works at the Center of Agriculture and Fisheries in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. I hope I've said that right.
Well done.
And also at the Institute of Livestock Farming in Dummersdorf in Germany. And here's a short video in which she introduces herself.
My Mein Name ist Anke Römer. Ich bin Wissenschaftlerin am Institut für Tierproduktion der Landesforschungsanstalt in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Mein Hauptgebiet sind die Milchkühe und hier insbesondere die Leistung und die Nutzungsdauer von Milchkühen. Wir forschen hier im Nordosten von Deutschland, in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, dicht an der Ostseeküste. Die Betriebe in dieser Region sehen häufig so aus wie dieser. Wir haben also fast ausschließlich Boxenlaufställe, Anbindehaltung nur noch ca. 0,1% der Tiere. Ansonsten sind es freigelüftete Boxenlaufställe und die Kühe sind hier fast alles deutsche Holstein-Schwarzbunt. In meinem Webinarvortrag wird es darum gehen, wie die Leistung und die Nutzungsdauer der Milchkühe in einen Parameter zusammengefasst werden können, dass der Landwirt einen effizienten Parameter an der Hand hat, mit dem er auch eine Kuh bewerten kann, ob sie leistungsfähig für seinen Betrieb ist oder nicht. Und das ist die Leistung je Lebenstag. Sie beinhaltet sowohl die Nutzungsdauer als auch die Lebensleistung.
Hi, Anke. Welcome. And how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Your presentation is all about lifetime daily yield. And as you heard before we saw your video, we asked the audience what they think the optimal life daily yield is of the best performing farms in the world. And I have the results here on my iPad. And the most popular answer with 55% is above 25 grams. Anke, what's the correct answer?
Julia and all others, the correct answer is answer number 3. The optimal lifetime daily yield of the best performing farms in the world is above 25 kilograms per lifetime day. My compliments to everybody with the right answer.
Okay. They know their stuff.
Okay, Anke, and then a question from my side. Do you believe there is a relation between the lifetime daily yield and sustainability? For example, is there a relation with methane emissions?
Yes, Jack. Sustainability includes not only economic but also environmental and social aspects. And so if you increase lifetime daily yield, you possibly need not that much cows to produce the same milk amount and not that much young stock. And every cattle in a dairy farm, lactating or not lactating, emits a certain amount of methane every day as a result of digestion. And that's from a physiological point of view perfect. There is an interesting research project from the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Belgium, and they suggest 2 management tools that together at least decrease methane emission about 11%. And that is first, slightly younger first calving from 26 to 25 months, and second, keep the dairy cows longer, so you can reduce the amount of heifers and not achieve achieve a lower replacement percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Super, thank you, Anke. It's now time for the second poll. And that's going to introduce the next topic, which is all around lactations. And the poll question is, what is the optimal number of lactations per cow from an economical point of view? While you're answering that question, it's time to introduce our second guest, and that's Albert de Vries, who is professor from the Department of Animal Sciences at the University in Florida. And he's going to talk about the optimal number of lactations for a dairy cow.
My name is Albert de Vries and I'm a professor of dairy science in the Department of Animal Sciences at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. We're here today at the university's dairy unit. We milk about 500 cows in 4 barns in a double 12 parlor. In my presentation, I will talk about productive lifespan of dairy cows. So naturally, it is said that dairy cows can survive up to about 20 years old, but dairy cows on farms almost never get that old. They are culled for production reasons often. Some of that is because they leave because the cow really fails. When I talk about failure, I mean the cow failed to get pregnant, or she has severe cases of mastitis, or she is so lame that it really warrants no even consideration to keep her longer. If we look at culling statistics in the US, then we see that our cows stay 3 lactations on average. A big part of that is because our cows do fail, right? There is something wrong with them we wish we could avoid. So whatever we can do on the management side to feed our cows as well as we can, to keep them as healthy as we can, to provide the best comfort as we can. For example, here in North Central Florida, we provide a lot of cooling to our cows because we live in a warm climate. To make sure our bedding is clean, so we keep the infection pressure down. All of this is very important to keep cows in the herd. If we're managed to do that, we create options to keep cows longer in the herd. That means that we may have some choice to how long should they stay in the herd. Now, in my presentation, I will talk about opportunity cost of keeping cows in the herd, in part because we bring better genetics in all the time, so the next replacement heifer is better, but also because cows mature at about the 4th or 5th lactation, and when they're getting too old, their production goes down too. They just become old and sort of used up. So in my presentation, we will look at how can we keep cows into the barn, but then secondly, what are the economics of keeping them perhaps too long, and what are opportunity costs so we can make really the most amount of profit per cow stall that we have in our farm.
Hello, Albert, and welcome to today's programme. I think I heard some Dutch roots, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I moved to the US about 25 years ago.
Ah, okay. And I can also hear that American twang a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm, that's correct, yeah.
We asked our viewers about the optimal number of lactations, and in fact, 64% of people said 5 or 6. Is that the correct answer?
Yeah, when I do calculations, I usually get to about 5 or 6, depending on some other factors, but I would say that's the right answer.
Oh, fabulous. Well done out there. And why is that number of lactations optimal from an economical point of view?
So from an economical point of view, at least in the US, and I think this is true for many farmers, we're interested in profitability, given the conditions are right, like society accepts what we're doing. And 5 or 6 is somewhat of a balance between mature cows, between replacement cost, and also some opportunity cost of bringing newer genetics into the herd. But obviously the condition has to be that these farms or these cows have an ability to stay on the farm, right? So management is critical that we offer that opportunity for them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Albert, you talk a lot about making the correct culling decisions. But unfortunately, farmers are not always in the position to decide, because sometimes the cows decide for them. And what I would like to know from you is, roughly, if you compare a cow that you have to cull involuntarily, early in lactation, versus a cow where you decide that you don't want to breed it again and you just let it finish her last lactation and then have it culled. What is the financial impact between, or the difference in financial impact between those two scenarios?
Yeah, if you have a cow that just calved and that normally would be an average producing cow, but you're forced to cull her, right? I mean, a severe case of mastitis or severely lame, we're looking at, depending on heifer price, depending on cull price, but easily into $1,000 or, close to €1,000 for young cows. For older cows, they're being used up, depreciated to some extent. It's somewhat less, but given, most of our cows in the herd are younger ones, this is really an expensive loss, these early lactation culls.
And roughly in the United States, what percentage of cows is culled voluntarily at the end of lactation, and what percentage is roughly culled early in lactation because something goes wrong?
Oh, most farmers would say that they have an involuntary culling reason for cows that leave, right? They're either didn't get pregnant, they're lame, there's mastitis. I do see more and more farmers that sort of have no flaws with a number of cows anymore. So I think the number of voluntary culling, if you will, is creeping up. But I think still the majority of cows that are culled, we really found something wrong with them. And sort of the economic decision to cull them becomes obvious, because that's really what an involuntary cull is. It is, the decision is so clear that there is not much left to decide.
So there's some work left for all of us to do, right?
Yes.
Fortunately. Thank you so much, Albert. And obviously we'll be coming back later to hear your presentation. We have another poll for you, and that is, what is the most common reason in your country for culling a cow? And we'd love to hear your answer, and we'll come back with those results in a little while. Our third subject is about the impact of systemic inflammation on lactational performance. And we have, again, another true expert on this. That's Professor in Dairy Nutrition, Lance Boomgaard.
My name is Lance Boomgaard. I'm the Jacobson Professor of Dairy Science at Iowa State University. My presentation will be about the transition period. My group and I have been reevaluating the traditional dogmas that explain transition cow failures. And in particular, we are questioning the idea that high NEFAs, hyperketonemia, and hypocalcemia are causing problems. We believe that most of the negative consequences in the transition period actually are response of immune activation. So inflammation can occur throughout the life cycle of a cow. And of course, an obvious scenario that we're all familiar with is mastitis. There are other times when inflammation occurs that can be at dry off or abrupt cessation in the making of milk. It occurred in the transition period. And what my group's been focusing on is this abrupt change of a high forage diet to a high concentrate diet, and trying to identify where in the gastrointestinal tract this inflammation is coming from. So obviously, it could come from the rumen, but we're thinking more and more that it's coming from the small and large bowel. And you end up getting soluble nutrients that should have been fermented up in the rumen, actually are finding the way to the small and large intestine and fermenting and causing barrier function problems in the large intestine.
So welcome, Lance. Lovely to have you with us today. As you know, we asked our audience what they think the most common reason is in their country for culling a cow. And we have, again, a massive preferred answer, which is number 2, fertility problems, voted on by 67% of people. Lance, what is the most common reason in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just talking to Albert de Vries about this exact question. It's probably a combination of all of the options there, but fertility, poor reproduction, and low productivity are the two that I would think would be high on the list.
Okay. And why is that?
Well, of course, these are two highly influential components to economics, right? So farming is still a business. So things that negatively affect the bottom line or the profitability of the operation are going to influence culling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lens, in your presentation you are going to talk about the detrimental effects of systemic inflammation, and you are going to fight an existing dogma, and that is that transition problems are not caused by low blood calcium levels or high NIFAs, but it's the other way around. But does it mean that if farmers are having problems shortly after calving, cow has cold ears, the rumen is not moving anymore, that it's not longer that it does not longer make sense to treat these animals, for example, with oral calcium? Or is it more that, try to avoid it, but once you have it, you still need to deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jacques. I think, what's the old saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think that goes a long way with dairy cows as well. So I think preventing the origin of immune activation, which is in the transition cow, could be the uterus, the mammary gland, the rumen and large intestine, and or the lungs, is key. But so preventing that immune activation to begin with is, I think, incredibly important and will pay dividends later. But of course, once the cow does get sick, you have to take action, right? You have to do everything we can to try to regain some type of level of health. And so part of that would be oral calcium. It could be potentially treating for the hyperketonemia or ketosis. But I think the biggest return on a farmer's investment would be trying to prevent the immune activation and thus inflammation to begin with.
Okay, and then of course the obvious candidates to prevent would be, for example, mastitis. But if you look at the production cycle of a lactation cow, are there other moments than shortly after calving where people should pay extra attention to avoid systemic inflammation?
Yeah, of course, a lot of this comes down to management, right? And farmer attention to cow comfort and stall cleanliness, calving pen cleanliness. But of course, that transition period is the highest risk of when you're going to have some type of immune activation. It's very unlikely you're going to have some, like for example, metritis during mid or late lactation. The dry off, I think, is probably a underappreciated time of when there's a chance of immune activation. When that abrupt stopping of the synthesis of milk. So then you have that 45 to 60 day window where the mammary gland, where oftentimes the cows aren't provided the attention that they are during lactation, and if they can pick up some type of mammary pathogen during that time, well, then when she starts making milk at an early lactation, that's a fantastic opportunity for there to be mastitis.
Okay, nowadays, for example, in my country, the Netherlands, there's a lot of emphasis on reducing the use of antibiotics. And as a result, most farmers nowadays don't use antibiotics for drying off cows anymore. So what should they do if they still want to avoid systemic inflammation as a result of drying off cows? What other things could they do to make it easier for the cows?
Yeah, so I think, again, that goes back to, in large part, management and cleanliness of the barn, cleanliness of the pens, keeping it as dry as possible. I used to live in Arizona, and mastitis was not a huge problem until it started raining. Arizona's a desert, so in the desert, when it's dry, mastitis and metritis are fairly low in the incidence, but as soon as the rainy season comes, the incidence of both metritis and mastitis increases. So clearly, the environmental pathogen load is a key part of preventing mastitis.
Okay, and what if my cow still produces 20 liters of milk at the moment? I need to dry her off. What's then your approach?
Yeah, well, I think farmers could consider a shortened dry period. Right? I think oftentimes stuck on that 60-day window where I think, especially on multiparous cows, they can probably get they can probably still have a successful subsequent lactation with a shorter dry period of, I don't know, 45, 40 days even. But yeah, a lot of that comes down to economics that probably Dr. DeFries could better comment on than me with regards to when to dry a cow off.
Okay.
Okay, super. Thank you so much, Lance. Our next topic in this talk show is all about hindgut health. And of course, we have another poll for you. The question this time is, what factors can increase the risk of a cow to develop hindgut and acidosis? And you'll see 4 answers on the screen in front of you. The specialist on this matter is Victoria San Fernandez, a ruminant researcher here at Trau Nutrition.
Hello, I am Victoria San Fernandez. I'm a researcher in the ruminant team here at Trau Nutrition, and we are at Kempenshof, our research farm, where we perform most of our study. So today I would like to talk about gut health. We now recognize that proper gut health is essential both for overall health and performance of our animals. If we have issues at the intestinal level, not only digestion and absorption are going to go wrong, we now recognize there are multiple functions of the intestine that will be also affected, like immune function, metabolism, etc. There are multiple factors that affect intestinal health in our dairy cows throughout their life cycle. And a lot of these factors tend to accumulate around the calving time in what we call the transition period. But probably one of the factors that is the best characterized is the introduction of the lactation ration. So typically we feed this high-grain diet to the animals right after calving. The introduction is abrupt. These are highly fermentable diets with a high content of starch. And we know these are risk factors for the development of rumen acidosis. Now, we have actually demonstrated that rumen acidosis, it's deleterious for intestinal health. It has a negative impact on intestinal health. But we tend to think only on the rumen when we think about our dairy cows. And when we're feeding these diets, there is a large portion of starch that it's going to bypass the rumen, and it's going to reach the small intestine first and the hindgut afterwards. What do we mean about the hindgut? We refer to the hindgut when we talk about the large intestine, so basically the cecum and the colon of the cows. And in the hindgut, the animals have its own microflora, their microbiome, capable of fermenting carbohydrates similar to what happens in the rumen. So with this large amount of starch reaching the hindgut, animals can actually develop hindgut acidosis. And there are some reports that suggest that the hindgut is indeed more sensitive to these acidotic insults when compared to the rumen. This is because the mechanism of defense of the hindgut are not as developed. The buffering capacity is not as well developed as in the rumen. Indeed, when we discuss some of the signs typical of rumen acidosis, we're actually discussing signs of hindgut acidosis. So if we think about the loose feces, the frothy feces, the mucin casts, these are indeed symptoms of hindgut acidosis, probably subsequent to rumen acidosis. So we actually believe that this is a window of opportunity for intervention, that by utilizing strategies targeting specifically the hindgut, we have room to improve both the health and the performance of our animals. So we need additional technology, rumen bypass technology, to reach specifically this site of the intestine. That limits us somehow on the type of interventions we can utilize. But for example, there is the case of prebiotics that seem to be well suited for this type of interventions. They are inert, we're not worried about their survival, and therefore relatively easy to apply rumen bypass technologies for them.
Welcome, Victoria. Lovely to have you with us physically here today.
Thank you.
Just before we saw the video, we asked the last poll question, what factors can increase the risk of a cow to develop hindgut acidosis? And interestingly, we have one answer that the top two answers are quite close. The one that has scored the most with 39% is actually high levels of bypass starch in the diet. And the second is all of the above. And that had 35%. So which is it?
So it's probably all of the above. So all of the factors in different proportions might have an impact on hindgut health, not only acidosis, but probably bypass starch, and I understand why that's so close to the right answer, will have the most weight on it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how can a farmer avoid both of these?
Well, there are multiple things that can be done from a management point of view. So basically anything you could do to avoid rumen acidosis is likely to help with hindgut acidosis. But today we want to go more in depth with nutritional opportunities, targeting specifically the hindgut to help support this part of the intestine.
Okay, now, Victoria, you rightly suggest that high levels of bypass starch could be part of the problem. But of course, that doesn't change the fact that cows genetically are able to produce tremendous amounts of milk and as a result need tremendous amounts of energy. So do you believe it's realistic to bring down the amount of starch in diets to such a level that they become healthy diets? Or is it always going to be a balancing act which once in a while goes wrong?
Yeah, as the previous speakers have said, it comes down to economics. And for the most part, I think it's quite clear we cannot get by reducing starch a lot in our diets. Again, there are small things we can do from a management point of view, the type of grain, the fermentability, things like that. But on top of that, we can support these animals with maybe nutritional solutions, like we would do with a sportsman, for example. We would do additional things. We wouldn't feed them the same diet we eat every day, for example.
Okay, now, it wouldn't be a surprise that I've seen the slides that you are going to present, and I've seen some horrible things there about the hindgut of animals suffering from hindgut acidosis. So I guess most farmers would like to prevent that. But then they first need to identify it. So what does a cow that is suffering from hindgut acidosis, what does it look like?
So it is difficult to differentiate between what's rumen acidosis, what's hindgut acidosis. And actually, in most of the situations, we won't see these two things independently. They will go hand by hand. But as I mentioned in the video, actually what we use to identify rumen acidosis in reality is hindgut acidosis. So the loose feces, the frothy feces, the mucin casts, these are problems in the hindgut, likely due in part to problems in the rumen.
Okay, and more and more people are recognizing that feeding cows properly is not just feeding the correct ration, but it's also about feed management. How important do you believe is the impact of slug feeding, for example, on hindgut acidosis? So heifers that can only come to the feed fence 6 times a day instead of 12 times a day and then start eating large quantities in one go. How bad is that?
Yeah, in general, feeding behavior will affect overall gastrointestinal tract health. So we know feed restriction, for example, is particularly bad for the intestine. Even short feed restriction, we might be thinking about days, but it seems like some hours of feed restriction can harm the intestine. So yeah, any behavior where animals cannot eat for X amount of time, or they need to eat a big amount abruptly and then stop, it definitely will have an impact on gastrointestinal health. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to seeing your presentation if the slides are full of nasty things, but I guess we'll see a bit later on. It's now time to welcome on our last guest, and that's Hugh Driesen, who is a veterinarian and director of Cow Signals. And he's going to talk about the impact of farm management on the number of lactations per cow. But of course, before we get to Joep, we're going to have another poll. And the question here is, what is the average number of lactations per cow in your country? But first, let's take a quick look at this video.
Hello, my name is Joep Driessen from the Cow Signals Training Company, and I'd like to talk with you today about 5 lactations. How can you get 5 lactations on your dairy herd? This is a dairy herd with 5 lactations, and the question is, how can we reach 5 lactations? So if you want to have more lactations, you have to keep your cows healthy. So you have to break through tunnel vision and open your eyes and prevent disease. It's about look, think and act. So, first of all, for feeding, you need 75 centimeter feed space that every cow can eat at the same time. For resting, you need a soft, deep bed, a soft 20 centimeter deep bed with sand or straw or any other material, that the cows can rest for 14 hours. Stress-free calving, you need a stress-free calving line for 2 weeks before calving, that the cows can be completely relaxed and calve without any stress. So these are the top 3 things: a place to eat, a place to rest, and a place to calve. And a few more details. In a stress-free calving line, you like to make a cuddle box. A cuddle box is very interesting. The Cow Signals cuddle box is a system that the mother can lick the baby, and that the mother can be milked during licking the baby and during eating. So you put a baby in a box, and you put some feet on top of the baby, so the cow can actually eat and lick the baby at the same time. She's completely relaxed, and you can milk the cow and get 6 to 8 liters top quality colostrum. That's the cuddle box principle. One of the tips for 5 lactations is having a dry off group. So the last 5 days you have your cows milked once or twice per day, but they eat dry cow feed. And then you drop the liters from 20 to 12 or from above 20 to below 12. And then they have a lot less stress when you dry them off. And lower cell count and less mastitis. So a very healthy step to make a dry off ration for the last 5 days. If you want 5 lactations, here we have one more tip for 5 lactations. And that is checking your fresh cows. The first 10 days, do the farm check. F-A-R-M. F, fever, check the temperature. A, activity, look at the head and the ears. 3, look at the rumen fill. And 4, check the manure. And that is the farm check. From every fresh cow, do the farm check to prevent disease. So if you do these 6 things right, you can have 5 lactations on all your cows. And the best farms are already on 6 lactations, so the sky's the limit. Happy cows, happy farmers, happy planet. Thanks for watching. My name is Joep Driessen, Cow Signals Training Company.
So, welcome. Nice to have you here with us today. Just before we saw your video, we asked the question of the average number of lactations per cow in the countries of the people watching. And we have the 2 highest answers is, first of all, number 2, between 2.5 and 3, which is 39% of people. And the second was between 3 and 3.5, which is 36%. What do you think of these results?
Well, that's averages in the world, and they often are overestimated because people don't know exactly. And we see that the world average, I estimated on 2.3 lactations average in the world, from what I know from 70 countries. We see the best 1% is on 5 lactations in the Netherlands. So okay. This is, the sky's the limit. And the best ones are on 6 or 7 already.
Wow. And what can farm management contribute to increasing the number of lactations?
Yeah, everything. It's amazing that the top farmers, I work with the biggest and the smallest farms in the world, from 1 cow to 20,000 cows. And I am tremendously, I respect farmers a lot. I have an amazing amount of experience I've seen on farms. And the good farmers are just doing everything a little bit better. And that's really, you can't describe that. Everything a little bit better. But the key things that should be done, the cow should rest, eat and calve without stress. That is only on 25% of the farms is that more or less organized. And the other 75% still can do a lot of simple things to improve.
Now, Joep, you say on most farms there's a lot of small things that could improve, right? But what if this were your lucky day, and I've got Aladdin's lamp here, and I shine it, and then you could do one wish, and that is something that tomorrow would be there on every farm. What would that one thing that you would want to change on every farm in the world, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. I would say starting a cow signals cuddle box principle, that you have an excellent bonding between mother and baby for 1 hour, and that you have the best effect of feed intake for both of these animals. So mother and child should be together for the first half hour at least, and that's what we call the cow signals cuddle box principle. If you start doing that, I see that the disease levels drop at 50% for the cows and for the young stock. So it's an amazing success factor, and we still don't know exactly how it works, but we see it works. And every farmer says, I have no time and I have no money. So if you want to do something better on a farm, well, where are you going to start? I have no time, I have no money. Well, the thing is, less disease. If you have less sick cows, you have a lot easier life and a lot more fun in your work. And I really want every farmer to reach that level. So let's start with the cow signals cuddle box principle, and that the cow can eat and the baby can get the colostrum in the really right moment, that is at calving or within half an hour.
Okay, now, Victoria told us when she was sitting here with us at the table that cows don't like periods of feed deprivation,
yes.
Right? If you would manage the calving process in an optimal way, including your cow signals cuddle box, how much hours of not eating would that make as a difference?
Yeah, that's amazing. The first research we did with our first cuddle box a few years ago, we had the first 30 cows scheduled, and one was in the cuddle box, the other one wasn't. And from the cows that stayed together in the straw with the baby for the first 5 hours, they had a 3 hours delay in feed intake. And the babies that went in the cuddle box, and the mothers were getting the food from the baby, like you saw in the video, that was like a direct action within a half an hour after calving. So it was a 2.5, 3 hours difference in the first meal. And if you also calculate the hours before calving, they hardly eat anything. I will show it in my presentation. Then you see that you're really losing feed intake around calving, which leads to 50% subclinical milk fever. So there's a lot to gain there around calving. That's the major effect of the cuddle box, that they can eat right away when they need it.
Okay, and what about the location of the cow when it calves? There's people who say, look, it's important hygiene, so they propose a separate calving pen. Often they say, look, the cow should be able to see the other cows.
Yeah.
Or do you think that it is better to keep the cow in the group?
Well, they shouldn't be changed in the last 10 days before calving. That's quite a bit of science available on that. So the last 10 days, you don't want to move cows anymore. And the just-in-time calving is suboptimal. The best thing is calving in the group or right next to the group with a visual. Just one gate, open gate next to the group. That can be done. That's what some really good farms do. But a lot of farms, especially family farms, they have a group calving system where they have like 10 cows and they calve in that straw yard together with their mates. And they calve in a corner and they have a visual and they're feeling safe. So I would recommend that.
Okay, thank you.
We're getting a few questions in from people watching, so thank you very much, and please keep this going throughout today. A question here, does the bonding between cow and calf increase the stress when separated?
A very good question as well. We saw some welfare legislation in Scandinavia where they said they should be together for 3 days, which is, I think, the worst. We used to go for 3 seconds. That's probably also not good. 3 weeks is excellent. 3 days is horrible. So it's either 3 seconds or, half an hour, 30 minutes, or 3 weeks. And I wouldn't do 3 days. So I think the bonding is very important. Also for mother qualities. They will have a baby later on themselves. So how are they going to treat their babies?
Yeah.
If they didn't get this first information from their mothers. That's one thing. The other thing is very technical, but that's the saliva, how do you start the rumen of the calf, and the colostrum. The live colostrum, fresh from their mother, is the very best and the only good medicine for a calf, the good feed for a calf. And that is what a lot of people go past, because they think, no, we have a smarter system, but it's worse for the calf and the mother.
Another one here. And your questions, by the way, are coming in on my iPad, which is why I'm looking here. But I'm very curious about the cuddle box principle. Putting feed over the calf doesn't look very hygienic to me. Is there any research to back up the statement that there is less disease?
Oh, yes. Well, a lot of experience. The hygiene point is a good question. I would say you can also, if you think this is an issue and you don't have really fresh TMR, because it should be fresh TMR, and that's clean. So I don't think there's any risk. You can also use top quality alfalfa hay, really top quality. The cows love it as well. So you can just wipe it over the baby and they will start eating the alfalfa hay, which will be an excellent first meal as well. But with TMR, they get also the energy and the minerals and everything, and they will eat it even more aggressively. And they're having a first meal right away. One bucket on top of the baby and they start eating. The umbilical is still a bit open, as there could be bacteria in, but that's what the cows clean very rapidly as well. And they really lick the baby really clean. If they stay together for half an hour, she has everything finished. So she's, in the meantime, stimulating the baby and also having a first meal.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then I have to ask this question because we're in the Netherlands. I know you spoke about the average number of lactations in the Netherlands, but somebody's asking what is the number of lactations of the top 10 farmers in the Netherlands?
Well, the average lactation in the Netherlands is 3.6. It's the highest in the world for house systems, where they don't have full grazing systems. The average in the world, I estimate, for 2.3, 2.4. In Holland, the top 1% is on 5 lactations at the moment in the Netherlands.
Glad we cleared that one up. Thank you. Thank you, Joop. That wraps it up for this opening talk show. But of course, we are going to have now 5 in-depth presentations from the experts. And each presentation will take about 20 minutes. And we love getting your questions in, so please keep them coming. And we'll make sure that we put them to your experts later. But first, we have a short break of just 10 minutes. So see you after that break.